What's up, guys and gals? It's Shawn Myszka, Movement Master and OptimizeMovement.com, coming to you with another Shawn's Rant and Rave. And today's rant and rave is likely, like most, going to have me pretty fired up. We're going to discuss a topic that is buzzing right now across not only movement and performance professions, but across sport domains and disciplines as a whole as well. This is the topic of that of new UFC champion Conor McGregor, and specifically his unique decision to employ or incorporate what he refers to as his movement coach. His stance on this, especially the importance that he feels as though this emphasis has had in the development of his mastery within his craft, has quite frankly created quite a buzz. You know, from even people like yours truly, I had heard a few weeks back that he had employed Ido Portal to direct his movement efficiency work, and I immediately became intrigued for a number of reasons. For starters, many of you know not only my passion for all things sport movement related, thus I can't help but support an athlete of higher levels of qualification, placing priority on the acquisition of movement skill. But also, in the last 4 to 5 years, I have called and considered myself to be that of a movement coach over any other role. And this is so much so that it has led me on this crusade to see those within the National Football League go in this direction as well. And I have pushed for the inclusion of a movement coach or a movement skill acquisition specialist or what have you on each respective team to fill what I see as a huge void in the practice and training activities, the exercise and drill prescription in the practice structure, and guidance given from coaches to athletes in regards to the attainment or acquisition of greater movement skill. Additionally, on top of this, I have never taken any of Ido's courses per se firsthand, but anytime that I have seen any of his work, there's a great deal there that piques my interest. Not everything. I don't see the specificity of everything. I don't see the relevance of everything. But there's enough there that has piqued my interest. In fact, it was a combination of Ido's thoughts along with those of others such as Erwin LaCour and martial artists like Bruce Lee and others, which have led me to take a greater emphasis or place a greater emphasis on the development of general movement efficiency in more novelty-filled movement patterns to start my NFL players' off seasons in recent years. You know, of course, I won't pretend that they form the majority of what I do throughout the year. But these periods, this focus or emphasis in these generalized or novelty-filled movement skills will set apart or prime the entire rest of the year by the ways we start out by addressing general movement more fully. And some of you have probably seen this or realized it with some of my novelty or natural movement obstacle course work that I've talked about here on Movement Mastery in the past. You know, I'll be the first to say that some of Ido's work appears to be quite unorthodox in its nature. And this fact is likely that what has led to some of the criticism from those both in movement-related professions as well as those within the mixed martial arts community, at least over the last week, and I'm sure this will continue to kind of unfold for everyone as well as things just continue to catch on. You know, and even though everyone is entitled to their opinion, I think some of this criticism is a little unfounded. And so let me elaborate throughout this video on exactly kind of where I stand with it. However, before we do that, first things first, I want to give a public kudos to Conor McGregor, not only for his ability to see the importance of movement efficiency, but also the purpose of it. You know, immediately after the fight, as he was being interviewed, McGregor went as far to say as precision over power and timing over speed. Think about this. This is a guy that truly gets it. He understands that though ultimately what we're looking for is motor performance, it's actually the detailed processes towards the attainment of that performance, the execution that really matters. And in my own little world, I dream of and salivate over a day where all athletes understand this. That it's more than doing what we have always done. It's more than gaining general motor abilities of strength, speed, or endurance. Let's remember here, all of the sport-specific skill in the world is worth very, very little if the athlete isn't able to move from point to point, position to position, through pattern to pattern, and place themselves in the right place at the right time to execute those respective, more specific skills. Movement is the vehicle that allows for the human organism to be placed in the correct or most functional spatial and temporal organization. And it is this then, that movement, which serves as the foundation of the solutions to most problems found within sport. Thus, movement optimization, movement ownership, movement efficiency, all of these things are going to be vital not only for performance enhancement, but also for longevity and injury reduction. And it's hard for anyone to truly argue any of that. The problem is that many in our field believe they are placing proper importance on this characteristic. But here's the thing, to be quite frank, they or most are not. And that's why I absolutely love that McGregor placed this priority on it, one convincingly, and then got people talking and taking more notice. Thus, whether someone loves or hates the ways that Ido was instructing or requiring McGregor to gain greater movement efficiency is really a moot point to this portion of the equation. The emphasis of movement in sports preparation is long overdue. No ifs, ands, or buts in my mind. Everyone I meet, including myself, can never know enough about movement in its organization, its control, its acquisition, and its optimization. Thus, thank you to Conor McGregor as well as Ido Portal for turning people's attention to it. But the other side of the issue, what about Ido's means and methods? Especially some of the criticism that he's hearing from many over the last week. Now, if you haven't seen any of the videos that they've put out, just do a quick internet search and you're bound to find at least a few of them. And granted, many in the performance professions are always quick to judge when we see videos. Small snippets of what an athlete does or did do in preparation for a season, an event, or in this case, a fight. And I'm personally guilty of this as well. And sometimes this is warranted, and other times we have to remember there's more to the story. Thus, let's keep a few things in mind here. First of all, no one, with the exception of those that were actually involved in McGregor's camp, can know exactly everything that they used, how the drills were structured, and how they were being practiced, as well as why they were even being used. What was the purpose? What Conor McGregor's weaknesses were coming into it, how he was being instructed step by step to gain attunement to these activities, the cueing and the feedback, as well as then how Conor McGregor felt before starting Ido's work, as well as how he felt after it and going into that championship fight. He seems pretty adamant to me that he feels as though this work was a big part of the equation to his success. And additionally, I don't really take Conor McGregor as a dumb guy, and not one bit. Thus, I tend to kind of trust more of his judgment more than some others seem to be giving him credit for. And I'm not suggesting it was the key, and I don't think either McGregor or Ido has stated that or believes that either. A performance of any sort in sport is always going to be a culmination of everything that the individual has done and that has led up to that point. Every bit of practice and instruction or experience in any realm is always going to be accumulating to the point where it's the product that we see when the athlete moves in the execution of sport tasks. There are some that are going to say that McGregor rolling around in sand or hopping around what appears to be like a monkey or whatever, or evading a stick, or moving ultra slow through fight-like stances or defensive footwork, or whatever it may be that you see or witness on any of these videos, that those things couldn't possibly transfer to more proficient movement in an octagon at the highest level of qualification. In fact, I'm usually one that personally is pretty harsh on many activities that are used in regards to their level of transferability. But let me say this, and I'm using this anecdotal experience from my NFL players as evidence for this. And I have a few key points here to make in support for their work. First of all, let's remember general movement always trumps specific movement. Meaning, if an athlete lacks proficiency within basic or general movement skills, as well as within their specific movement skills, we should not and cannot start at the specific movement first. If we did this, this will only leave severe compensation in most cases within the foundation of all the intrinsic dynamics, that athlete's biodynamic structure of all of their movement patterns. Think about it this way. No strength coach worth a handful of spit would address more specific strength qualities like rate of force development or rate of force absorption or reactive ability if the athlete didn't already possess prerequisite levels of basic maximum strength. You know, and that seems almost asinine to think of for most strength coaches. Yet so many seem to think that McGregor should have only been working on nothing but specific fighting techniques, such as combinations and footwork that are conducive or match that of his level of qualification in the combat sports. You know, and let's say this, I'm pretty freaking certain that he did work on specific techniques as well. That those things that we're seeing are not the only things that were being done. Those which are also going to be performed and executed in the context of his performance environment and would involve enhanced information movement coupling, enhancing specificity as well. But I'm also pretty certain, to add on top of that, the inclusion of at least some of these general movement patterns and skills that we witness from the videos, and the enhanced control of those general patterns that came from learning them also could assist in the acquisition of more refined specific movement skills that he had already firmly established. Notice I didn't say that they were responsible for the technical execution or display. I said that they could serve to enhance them. Now, I say this because if you've ever required an athlete to learn more novel movement patterns or skills, such as those of what we saw, of even a totally differently appearing, unrelated movement skill, you may also notice that there will be a new heightened state of both awareness as well as motor control when the athlete goes back to the learning or the execution of more sport-specific skills. Even if we're just talking about an athlete slowing down, already acquired, already laid down, already learned patterns and positions. This slowing down gets the attention in the athlete's brain and behavioral levels. The perception of formerly redundant sensory data immediately increases. And after perception and attention changes, so can movement control of the body in time and space. And I think that's something that we have to think about with some of the things that we were witnessing from McGregor and Ido. And that's something that I have at least found with my NFL guys who just so happen to reside at a similar level of qualification in their respective sport as Conor McGregor does in his. Another thing that I found is, that kind of leads to the improvement of more specific sport movement skill through the use of more generalized patterns which represent more novelty to the brain, the behaviors, and the biomechanics of the athlete is this. that one way to tease out certain compensations or dysfunctions in an athlete's movement signature, an athlete's biodynamic structure, those compensations and dysfunctions that they may be represented by less efficiency or energy leak or by pain, the way to kind of tease those things out is through the use of breaking the information movement or perception action coupling that the athlete has become so accustomed to, that they have learned and acquired. This can occur by allowing the brain and behaviors to feel certain new aspects or changes within the biomechanics from general or novelty movement patterns. And this imposed variability then works to essentially clear the representations that the athlete already makes each and every time that he or she has to perform a given pattern. And again, a way to do this is through getting that athlete or putting that athlete in an environment or position in patterns where they must perform, learn, and better control movement that they are not accustomed to, whether it's in big ways or whether it's in small, minute, detailed ways. And by learning these novel movement patterns, even those that appear to be quite different in their organization, formation, or structure, you often open an athlete's awareness up to utilizing or going through a process where they're freezing or fixing and then further releasing degrees of freedom at a multi-level of analysis, essentially gaining awareness for that athlete of what he or she has at their disposal in regards to the formation of additive or supplementary movement solutions. And they kind of get to experiment within and further understand their overall biodynamic structure, their movement signature, and their overall perceptual motor landscape, as well as what affordances for action their brain behaviors and biomechanics actually have. I don't find it as a coincidence that McGregor has stated that he was very tight going into his last fight prior to this recent one last week, that he felt very stiff and rigid. Obviously not exactly indicative of how you want a fighter of a high level of mastery and skill to be going into the octagon with. And in contrast, that going into this past fight, this fight of last week, he felt fresh, he felt fluid, he felt ease of movement. So I don't believe any of this is a coincidence. I believe that all of this emphasis on movement efficiency did make him more proficient in the octagon, even if he was just learning and acquiring generalized motor patterns, learning and controlling them, and that it did actually have a carryover and transference and correspondence in this regard. And I don't know where or how Ido will plan to progress McGregor's movement development regimes from here, but I will say that if he continues to progress it in ways that are even more specific to the context of the movement required for the sport, but also more specifically, if he continues to progress it in ways that are conducive to Conor McGregor's constantly raising level of movement mastery and where he resides at, we may continue to get a greater glimpse of an athlete who is changing his biodynamic structure of his overall movement toolbox, his strategies, his solutions, and his biomechanics through an establishment of a more authentic movement signature, as well as we might see a first-hand representation of movement variability and how that plays into the whole equation. So no matter what side of the fence you kind of reside on with this Ido Portal and Conor McGregor movement coach idea, I think it's for the greater good, and I'm excited and intrigued to see how it all continues to play out. So for another Shawn's Rant and Rave, this has been Shawn Myszka, Movement Master and OptimizeMovement.com. I'll talk to you guys on the flip side. Until then, let's continue to master the art of optimizing movement.